Alright, so the New World closed beta ended just a few days ago, and there were a few prevalent issues related to weapons, and one of those issues were the amount of great axes we were seeing. Great axe right out of the park was just straight up busted, and here are the two things that made it busted. There are two issues with this. The first issue was Enduring Strike. The Enduring Strike passive, which if you spec'd into it, what it was supposed to do is add grit to your heavy attacks, and then grants a 20% damage reduction while you're doing the heavy attack, while the grid is still active. Well, that was bugged to fuck, because whenever you were just holding a great axe in your hand, that passive was activated. So if you were holding a great axe in your hand, running around with it, attacking your light attacks, you were still getting 20% damage reduction across the board. So this didn't stack up. If you were to do a heavy attack with your great axe, it wouldn't give you 40%, it would still be 20% because that 20% was active all the time. Now this alone has a huge effect when you're fighting anybody. It's more noticeable when you're fighting another great axe user because you're doing less damage and you're healing for less. Now let's move on to the second fucking issue, which is the more well-known issue, and that is the double hit from the gravity passive. So always on your second swing, when you swing left to right, you get a double hit. Now that double hit wouldn't have been as bad because generally, you know, that second hit would maybe hit for like 600 to 800. You know, it's not a big deal, except if you're light armor and you have no constitution, then you're gonna get smoked by it. But what made the great axe so good with that on top, especially in group PvP, in any kind of group play, this is where this all comes in handy. If you're going up against 4 or 5 guys at one time, you can take them on with the great axe because 1, you're taking 20% less damage against all sources, and 2, once you get the double hit, and if you're hitting all those guys, you know, they're all on top of you, you are getting the benefits from healing yourself. So well, I don't know why you wouldn't have done this, but if you didn't get critical gains, which on a critical hit, you heal yourself for 10% of your damage done. So if you light attack, you know, 4 or 5 guys in front of you, and then do your charged heavy attack from the double hit, you know, that's like 6,000-7,000 damage probably right there if you're hitting all those guys. You know, if they're all, let's say they're all wearing light armor, you probably hit them for 2k, maybe like between 1 and 2k each. Let's say they're wearing different types of armor, just to generalize it. So let's say between 5 to 7k, you just hit those guys. You know, 10% of 5,000, that's gonna be 500 health returned back. And that's just from the critical. So if any of those guys were below 30% health, then that's another 10% you would get back, which in most cases they would be after you did your first you know, light heavy combo. So the great axe offered 20% damage reduction, it offered a high damage output, and it offered a high self-sustain healing abilities, which was really only noticeable if you're fighting multiple guys at one time and you're alone or something, right? You're not going to really notice the healing benefit if you're only fighting one person. The only thing that you would be getting from the one person is an extra 600 damage hit, which in reality you would have beat that person anyways because you're taking 20% limited damage to begin with. And if you were using gravity well and you spec'd all the way into it, and you would get the 20% fortify, you know, you're taking 40% less damage for a few seconds while you're in your gravity well. And this leads me into the next point. Great axe paired with life staff. If you saw a life staff user, most of the time they were using great axe. And the caveat with this is when they switch to life staff, you know, they pop down their buffs, sacred ground, they get fortify, that lasts for like 20 seconds, 30 seconds, some crazy number. And they switch back to great axe, they are now receiving 40% less damage all the time for that amount of time. So this is why that build specifically was so broken, is because you were receiving almost half the damage. And now fortify only goes up to 50%, right? That's the maximum amount. But since this great axe passive is not fortify, it's just straight, you know, reduction, you could technically get up to 70% damage reduction if you're in wars or whatever, you had fortify stacking from other healers or sword and shield. So that's where it was really noticeable that you couldn't even kill a guy because of that. Now life staff, as long, you know, come launch, they fix the damage reduction, they fix the double hit. Life staff users will not 95% of the time use their second weapon as great axe, because 1, they're going to be taking a lot more damage, and that means they're going to have to be using their life staff a lot more instead of switching to Great Axe. They're not going to be healing as much with Great Axe because the double hit's gone. Two underlying issues that have a great effect across the board with many other synergies, such as life staff. Now the life staff is a separate issue and another topic, and here's the build that I used. If I was solo, I used Great Axe and Hatchet, and if I was in group, I would use Great Axe and Hammer. So those are my thoughts on the closed beta PvP meta. I went in using Great Axe and Hatchet from the beginning because that's what I used in alpha before all this shit was broken. I've been a Great Axe guy from the beginning, and I will continue being a Great Axe guy once they fix this. I can recognize that there were issues with it and it was bugged. You had unintended bugs and things being used, and I hope that it gets fixed in launch because I cannot wait to still smoke people with Great Axe and then they won't have anything else to complain about. Alright, peace.